this lesson, we're going to start talking about setting strategy. This is the good stuff, where everyone thinks that brilliance can be best exemplified. And the truth is that very few strategies are truly original. So, the objective of this module is to give you a framework for comparing different strategies, as well as to provide you with some of the generic strategies off which you can develop your own approach. So let's begin where our last lesson left off, and that was with the completion of the SWOT analysis, summarizing our current position. Each of our lines of business, or product lines, may have a different SWOT analysis. And the goal of analyzing the strategic factors is to identify a niche where the company can use its distinctive competencies to take advantage of a market opportunity. The specific niche should be so well suited to the company's internal and external environment that competition is unlikely to be effective in serving it. Ideally, this specific niche is just large enough for one company to satisfy. This too discourages competition. For example, think about the market niche that the Zamboni company has enjoyed for nearly 50 years. The company grows with the market niche. Now, competitive theory suggests that we should aim to maintain a dominant market share within our niche in order to generate and sustain economic profits. Let's turn our SWOT analysis into what is called the TOES matrix to demonstrate how we convert our current assessment into strategy formulation. So for instance, if something is both a strength and an opportunity, we should attack with full force. If we have an area of strength but threats loom, then we should consider strategies to defend our position if we can. And in an area where there's an opportunity, but we have yet to achieve a distinctive competency, we should consider it a reinforcement strategy. And finally, in the lower left, in an area where we are both weak and a threat exists, we should pursue strategies to retreat or mitigate this particular line of business. Sounds like a war game strategy, and many courses are written on this topic alone. We will look at a variety of generic strategy frameworks in this lesson designed to give us a place to start strategizing. Now, as I alluded to way back in the introductory lesson, strategy is a very broad concept. And this is where strategic planning discussions can get bogged down because often strategic issues are most visible at the lowest levels of what I call the hierarchy of strategic decisions. However, solving lower level strategic issues requires clarity on the higher level strategic issues first. So one of the early conversations we've got to have is around defining the strategic issue and addressing the issue as high up on the pyramid as we can go. Then we work down. Characteristics of a strategic issue include such things as being rare, long-term in nature, directional setting, and it requires a go, no-go type approval. There's a strategic definition worksheet in your strategy toolkit which you can download from the financelearningacademy.com website. Corporate strategy answers the questions of which businesses should we be in, and how does being in various businesses create synergy or add to the overall competitive advantage of the corporation? Growth strategies are pursued when the company aims to grow sales and make the business larger. Stability strategies are followed when the business has matured and has few growth opportunities left. Retrenchment strategies are used when the business is in decline. Business strategy represents the competitive position of the company's offerings in the market served. And we'll look at that in the next lesson. Further down the pyramid, we have functional strategy, and that occurs at the department level with an emphasis on short and medium-term plans. These strategies must be aligned with the corporate and business strategies. Eventually, strategies must be broken down into specific requirements of individuals, sometimes referred to as operational strategy. These can be achieved by setting corporate-wide policies and procedures or by setting individual objectives for each of the managers and employees that make up the foundation of the pyramid. In this lesson, we're going to focus in at the peak of the pyramid, the corporate strategy. Now let's take a look at each of our different corporate strategy areas. Growth strategies are necessary for companies to pursue to gain critical mass. And growth can be achieved through either internal organic growth and/or mergers and acquisitions or strategic alliances. Concentration strategies focus in on the existing product line. If your industry is growing, this is a favorite strategy. Vertical growth is achieved through either backwards or forward integration. And this strategy enables the company to reduce costs, gain control over its resources or materials, improve its quality control, and possibly even obtain access to new customers. Horizontal integration is achieved by expanding either the product line or the market served. Diversification strategies are often used in mature industries where growth is limited. Concentric diversification occurs when the company expands into a related industry. Ideally, the company will identify other industries where the distinctive competencies can be effectively reused to compete effectively. Things that a company will look for will be such things as similar technology, similar customers, similar distribution channels, similar managerial competencies, and product similarities. So think of a company like Procter & Gamble, which has a broad portfolio of consumer products. Conglomerate strategies are used when the current industry is unattractive and the firm lacks competencies to attack other industries. To move to an unrelated industry is primarily driven by financial considerations of cash flow or risk reduction, and less so on product or marketing synergies with existing businesses. Attractive industries include those that require cash that can't be obtained elsewhere, and industries which are counter-cyclical to the current businesses. A good example of a company that works like this is General Electric. Growing the business through international expansion is complex, and there are a number of strategies to pursue international customers. You can export products and services domestically to the customer directly. You can also grant rights through licenses to allow someone else to sell your products in a foreign country. You may franchise your business name and operating systems to a local operator. You may enter into a joint venture arrangement with an international partner. You may acquire a company in a foreign market. You may just open up a branch office inside the foreign country and begin operating directly. And finally, you may partner with other foreign companies to leverage their competitive strengths with your own. For instance, in areas of manufacturing, research, and technology. Having decided that you want to grow the business, there could be hundreds of ideas as to what could be pursued to achieve this growth objective. New markets, new products, new channels, new customers. But we need a strategy tool to help us evaluate these options for strategic growth. Enter the Ansoff Matrix, sometimes called the Product Market Expansion Grid. And this matrix shows the risk exposure of a particular growth strategy as you move to different quadrants. The lowest risk exists by pursuing a market penetration strategy, as indicated in the lower left quadrant of the matrix. Here you're already familiar with the market as well as your own products. Moving to an adjacent quadrant increases the risks by targeting new markets or introducing new products. If you plan to do both, introduce new products to new markets, your level of risk increases again to the upper right quadrant. To mitigate risk when you're moving between quadrants, you will undertake research, build new capabilities, assemble resources like capital and personnel, and build more detailed rollout plans. This may include detailed functional strategies, which we will discuss in a later lesson. Stability strategies are appropriate for those companies operating in reasonably predictable environments. Small business owners will often use this strategy once they have found a profitable niche to serve. A pause strategy is an opportunity to rest before pursuing another strategy. Only incremental improvements are considered. It's considered to be temporary until conditions warrant the next phase of growth. A do-nothing strategy is basically a continuation of the current operations for the foreseeable future. This strategy requires a stable environment and limited changes in competition. A profit strategy is used when the business conditions are worsening and expected to be temporary. Management desires to maintain profitability and does so by reducing investment or curbing discretionary expenditure such as marketing or research and development. If it continues to do this for too long, however, the business will deteriorate. Retrenchment strategies are relevant in a weak competitive environment, which is characterized as one with falling sales and profits. Management must develop a strategy to maximize or preserve shareholder value. A turnaround strategy is applicable when the problems are curable. This strategy often requires consolidating the business into the profitable lines and streamlining operations by closing unprofitable lines of business. Bankruptcy protection may or may not be a part of the strategy. A captive company strategy trades off long-term opportunities for stability by finding a buyer who is willing to contract to purchase a substantial amount of the company's production. The buyer gets a good price on the product that it's buying, and the company locks in a customer for its output, likely giving up some of the potential for incremental economic profits over the longer term. A divestiture strategy looks to maximize the value of the business by selling it en bloc to realize the highest potential value. And finally, in a worst case scenario, we may have a liquidation strategy where the business is likely insolvent and has few alternatives available. No one is interested in buying the business because it's unprofitable. A company may reorganize and try to emerge from bankruptcy if a visible business plan can be discovered. Otherwise, the business is liquidated in pieces to maximize the proceeds to repay creditors and shareholders if any proceeds are left over. The Boston Consulting Matrix is a useful way of looking at the existing and potential business units in the context of growth, stability, and retrenchment strategies that we've just discussed. The intent of this analysis is to help the company determine its investment strategy and resource allocation. The matrix focuses on the dimensions of market share and market growth. From strategy research that first emerged in the 1970s, it was believed that a high market share tended to lead to higher levels of economic profit. While this is good in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to continue investing in these lines of business. In comes market growth, which is a proxy for market attractiveness. High growth is good. Low growth is obviously bad or less attractive. So low growth markets tend to be more competitive, as we've learned from our 5 forces analysis. In order to use this strategic tool, you plot the opportunities on the grid presented here, and then you determine what you will do in terms of 4 generic strategies. Will you build market share by making further investments? Will you do nothing? Will you reduce the investment and look to monetize your existing position? Or will you look to divest of the line of business altogether? The McKinsey Matrix is a similar sort of matrix, albeit a little bit more sophisticated to the Boston Consulting Group matrix. It uses the industry attractiveness and business unit strength on each the y-axis and the x-axis. And by plotting the position of the various business units or its product lines, directional strategies can be determined. This is how it works. And once again, this is included in your strategy toolkit, which is available for download at thefinancelearningacademy.com. The first step is to determine the industry attractiveness. Does this sound familiar? Well, it should, because you will use your findings from the pest analysis and the 5 forces analysis to identify a handful of relevant factors. Just be aware that you will need to apply the same set of factors to all the business units or product lines that you are evaluating. You should weigh the factors and assign ratings the same ways we did in our SWOT analysis to come up with a weighted score. The second step is to determine the business strength. Once again, you can go back to the SWOT analysis to accumulate a set of relevant factors against which you can evaluate the strength of each business unit or product line. And the final result is to plot the results on the grid using the 2 scores determined through steps 1 and step 2. Now, to make this even more visual, market size can be reflected in terms of the size of the circle and the market share represented by the size of the pie within the circle as depicted by circles A, B, and C on your screen in front of you. Now, there are 3 generic strategies that come out of implementing this analysis, as indicated by the 3 different shaded squares within the matrix. a growth strategy should be pursued for businesses in the upper left green squares, for example, as indicated by Business Unit A, which makes sense given the high level of industry attractiveness and the high level of business unit strength. A stability strategy can be used for those businesses in the middle yellow squares, for example, as indicated by Business Unit B. Here you can invest more resources to try to move the business into the green zone, or defend your current position, or attempt to find a more profitable niche. And finally, we have a retrenchment strategy is probably going to be most applicable when we have a business that gets plotted in the red squares in the lower right of the matrix. The strategies here are probably to divest of the business if no imminent turnaround potential exists. So we covered a lot in this lesson. We started with showing how the findings from our SWOT analysis and our current assessment can be used to help develop strategy. We then discussed the various corporate strategies a company can pursue for one or more of its lines of business. We looked at growth strategies, stability strategies, and retrenchment strategies, and used some strategic frameworks to help us identify when each of these strategies should be considered. That's all for this lesson, so until next time, don't stop to get to the top. When you get to the top, don't stop.